Hey, I'm Kenneth, and I just finished the IndieTales Game Jam. Now, if you're not familiar with what a game jam is, it's where you have a set amount of time to make a game based on a theme.
It's time for the announcement of the theme. I'm pulling it out of the hat right now. Here it is. It is this one. It's one room.
For this game jam, we had 72 hours to make a game based on the theme One Room. Now, when I say we had 72 hours, that is the duration of the jam. But for my time zone, the jam started and ended at like 4 a.m. So not really the optimal time to start on it. Can't really utilize all those 72 hours so easily. But I guess I usually sleep twice during a jam, and I still slept twice during this jam, but it was during the start and then in the middle rather than twice in the middle. Whatever, it doesn't matter. The theme was one room. I had a couple ideas in mind. I was really interested in the idea of making like a horror game. So I thought about a game where you're like set in a hospital and you're a doctor and you're haunted by the patients that died in that room or something like that. But the idea didn't really come together in a way I was satisfied with, and eventually I had an idea that I thought was much better. I had the thought of, what if you were like a hotel manager, you were running a hotel, and you booked it out to tons of people, you had a ton of customers lined up, you bought a bunch of advertisements, but your hotel only had one room. So your job as the manager is to keep everyone from finding out that they're all booked into the same room. When I originally had the idea, I was picturing more of like a simulation management type of game where you have to like go and trick customers and keep them out. But I think that was way overscoped for the amount of time I had. It's hard to make that kind of a huge sim game in such a short time frame and have it still be fun. But I still really like the idea. So I thought, how can I retool this idea into something more manageable in the time frame? And I came up with a tower defense game where you create towers of stuff to keep the customers out of the one room. Stuff like coffee machines and loud music to keep them awake. Originally, I thought we might have stuff to like drag them back into the lobby and stuff to keep them from getting to the room. But by the end of it, it was just around the keep them awake so they don't want to go to their room and sleep idea. Now, I was super happy with this idea as soon as I had it, so I immediately got to work on making the tower defense game. Now, I'm a good programmer. I know how to program. I mean, I was a gameplay engineer working on Halo. I know what I'm doing. But for some reason, I had some kind of mental block, and I just really struggled to get the basic functionality of this tower defense game working. I don't know what the block was, but every time I tried to like add a feature and get the pathfinding, make the towers work correctly, every step there was just stuff that wasn't working correctly. Eventually, I deleted a bunch of it and re-architectured the code in a way that made more sense. And even that didn't fully solve all the problems, and I did end up with a lot of bugs later on because of this, but it took me almost the full first day just to get the basic functionality up. I created placeholder art to like block out the map so that you could see the tile system and you could see the hallway and the bedroom. I created like a little test customer and had him walk around, and I created what was initially meant to be placeholder art for the towers. This art ended up sticking all the way till the final product, but it was originally intended to just be placeholder art. So after the first day of getting all the basic gameplay functionality in so that you could play a tower defense game, I sent it off to a friend of mine for playtesting while I made the basic art for the map. I drew out the actual hallway, the bedroom, the tiles on the floor, the main lobby area, just getting it so that the game looked a little bit nicer. And by the time I finished that art, my friend had got back to me and said that it felt very strange. There was a problem with the layout of the tiles. The way you led the customers through the map felt very strange, especially at the start of the game. And I toyed around with that problem for a while until I eventually came up with the solution of being able to pick up and drag customers around as if you were the manager escorting them to where you needed to be. I thought this was a pretty good solution because it both solves the problem of having a slightly strange map, because if the customer takes a route you're not expecting or you don't have like the full map built out yet for them to traverse, then you can put them where you want them to be. Additionally, it gives you an element of like, oh, they've broken through, they can't get to the room yet, I need to drag them back to the lobby or just get them away from here so they don't find out that that's not their room. And it has the added benefit of keeping the player busy at all times, because even once you've got your towers down and you've spent all your money, you still have something to do. You can actively drag your customers around and put them where you want them to be, like you were managing the hotel. I thought this was a very good solution, but that does mean I had to implement it. And with the systems I had set up, the customer AI wasn't exactly built to be able to understand randomly placing it in a different spot. The customer was very sequential, as like, I've entered the lobby, now I can meander around until I get to the main area, walk through the tiles, get to the hallway, walk up to the room, go to sleep. It understood how to do all that. But when you just pick it up from the lobby and drop it into the hallway, or pick it up in the hallway and drop it onto the tiles, or move it from one tile to another tile, or move it from the tile back into the lobby, it needed to understand how to resume its position from anywhere in its AI. This wasn't exactly difficult to make understand, it was just a little bit complex and a little bit time time consuming to redo the customer AI to understand resuming elsewhere on the map. The actual functionality of clicking them and dragging them around, that wasn't difficult. But that did mean I had to dedicate a couple hours to a feature that I didn't initially have scoped for the game. But I got that in so that you can click and drag your customers around. And then I added the basic UI, just a little bar at the top with the different towers displaying your gold and your hotel star level. I decided that you'd have a 5-star hotel, and every time a customer found out that they had booked the same room as someone else, every time they made it through while the room was taken, you would lose 1 star until you lost all your stars and then the game was over. I thought that was a clever scoring system, you know, the idea of a 5-star hotel. After I got that basic UI in, I added the customer art. Now, I originally had the idea for different types of customers that interacted with the different types of towers in their own way, because there are 4 tower types: the wet floor signs, the coffee makers, the muffin trays, and the stereos. And I had the thought of, oh, okay, maybe there are children who aren't as affected by the sugar in the muffins, and maybe there are nurses and doctors and service industry people who have extra sleepiness, and maybe there's programmer customers that are immune to the coffee makers, or musicians and like metalheads that are immune to the stereos, so that you had to properly manage your tower so that you'd be able to deal with any customer that came in. But once I got to this point of making the customer art and designing the different customers, I decided to cut the different customer types based on the fact that I had to dedicate those extra hours to making the click and drag customer feature. Now, I will say that I am happy with the way the customer art turned out. The run cycle is a little bit doofy. I mean, I don't really know what they're doing. There's like, wee, with their arms. It doesn't really make that much sense, but I added a lot of squash and stretch to it, so it ended up pretty cute anyway. And I split the customer into 5 body parts. You have the body, the hair, the face, the shirt, and the pants. For the body type, I made 5 different bodies of different skin tones. I added a whole bunch of different hairstyles, a couple different face options, and then a bunch of shirts and pants. I took the sprite sheet, which had the idle animation and the running animation for each of the different body parts, and then color swapped it into a bunch of different colors, so that you ended up with a lot of options, so that when a customer spawns, it picks one of each of the options to create a unique customer. If I was going to do the different customer types, I would have just had a pool of, oh, these hairstyles and clothes are only available to the programmers or the nurses, that kind of thing, to keep it separate. But because I ended up cutting that, it's just one big pool that everything pulls from randomly. And I think the customer art did come out very cute. I'm a really big fan of these little idiots and the way they run around like, woo! And I also made it randomly pick a different playback speed for the running animation, as well as different factors of squash and stretch to apply while they're running, so that each character squashes and stretches a little bit more or less, and each character has a different running animation speed, so that some characters look faster and bouncier, and some characters move slower, and some characters are more stiff when they move. I think it added another layer of variety to the characters, which made them feel more alive, rather than it's like, oh, it's a bunch of the same thing. Now, once I got this build done, I sent this to my friend for playtesting, as well as playtesting it myself, and we both came to the same conclusion that the game gets really boring really fast. Once you've built all your towers, there's nothing else you can do. So the game has to have a stopping point where you can still win based on the limited space you have for your towers, but also it feels kind of bad to get to that point so quickly. Additionally, once you've built those towers, you have nothing to do but like drag the customers around. So I had another gameplay problem, and I came to the conclusion that the best way to fix this was to add tower upgrades, which was another feature that I thought would be nice, but I didn't have originally scoped for the project. So that was my next task. I figured I needed to be feature complete really soon, because I was already in like the last 20 hours of the jam. I was running very low on time. So I got the upgrades in there. I got the menu for buying the upgrades. I tested them out to make sure they worked. Adding the slow effect on the muffin tray caused a whole lot of bugs that took me a while to fix. But eventually I got those upgrades in so that you could open the menus and upgrade your towers. And I created the 3 upgrade categories that each of the upgradable towers has. I figured there wasn't really anything to upgrade about the wet floor signs, and it's just a thing you can't walk past. But for the other ones, I thought it made sense to basically have damage, fire speed, and range. Now, I will say that the range upgrade is a bit of a bait for all 3 of the towers. You're better off spending that money elsewhere. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with the way the upgrades came out, especially because I got them done much faster than I would have initially estimated for myself, which was important since they weren't considered in the initial scope of the project. Now, the next thing I needed to do was add the main menu and a tutorial. I was running lower on time, so I decided to do a very simple tutorial where it's just in the main menu, it describes how to play the game. It's basically just a block of text, and you can click the next arrow to go to the next block of text, and it slowly explains. It gave me a chance to explain the premise of the game and how it relates to the theme as well, which is something that I kind of learned I should do based on my last jam, where the theme was a little bit less obvious, and since I never like directly explained it to the player at the start of the game, it's easier to miss. Additionally, I think the concept for this game is very funny, and honestly, the concept for this game is the best part of this game, so having that intro screen where I tell the joke that the whole game is built around, I think it pays off very nicely. But I created that tutorial that has the explanation as well as the main menu screen so that you can start the game. It's not the prettiest main menu I've ever made, I'm not super in love with it, but it served the purpose well, and I made it pretty quickly. And then I needed to make music and sound effects. Now, Now, unfortunately, because of my poor planning, I wasn't able to partner with INSANDIO for this project. Double unfortunately, this is a jam where you're not allowed to use any pre-made assets whatsoever. That includes music and sound effects. So my usual strategy of get INSANDIO to make me cool music, use sound packs for cool sound effects, I don't have to do anything hard, didn't work. I had to make my own sound effects and make my own music. Now, I know how to play the guitar, and I'm decent at drums, but I never really made music on my own, and I've especially never made music using like online tools. I've written a couple songs just on my guitar, but I never learned music theory. I learned reading tabs and playing chords. So I didn't really know what I was doing in making this song. I just hopped into Beatbox and started messing around, clicking stuff until I got something that I thought sounded passable for what I wanted. I will not say that this music is good, although I do kind of like the drum beats I made because I at least have a concept of how to do that. But for the rest of it, I will say the music is serviceable. It's not amazing, but it's not that bad. And then for the sound effects, I opened up BFXR and clicked random sounds until I heard something I liked and then tweaked it a little bit until I thought it fit the game. That strategy worked a lot better than I had thought it would. I think the sound effects for my game actually ended up pretty good, considering it was generated at random and tweaked. So then I went through and got all those sound effects and music added into the game, and at this point, I was running very, very low on time. Because of the extra features that I didn't initially plan on implementing, and then I had to add to make the game even a little bit fun to play, I ended up needing to cut out most of the time that I had dedicated to doing bits of polish. This means this game is quite unpolished. There's a lot of things I would have liked to add. There's no indication for the customer's sleepiness level, which is just their HP. There's no particle effects, no kinds of screen shake. There's no indication when a customer like gets hit and takes damage, really. There's no indication when a customer like dies, which is they leave satisfied, other than basic sound effects. And I think that's kind of a flaw with the game, but I ended up needing to pull other things in that were more important to making a fun game than polishing at the end. And the only thing I had any time left to do was balance the game. And I didn't really have enough time left to do that correctly. I sent it to my friend of mine to playtest it, and I was playtesting it as well in the final hours of the jam, and we both came to the same conclusion that the game was way, way too easy. The upgrades were way too cheap, the customers died super quickly, there were a lot of problems with the balance. And so I went through the process of tuning the balance however I could. One thing I did was nerf all the upgrades, and then later I also increased the cost of the upgrades, but never unnerfed them. So the upgrades honestly don't feel that good. And also, I made a little math error in the formula that calculates the price that the upgrades should be, so they increase in price by a multiplication factor that I didn't intend to be in there. So they reach unaffordable levels way faster than I planned them to. Additionally, the customers move a little bit too fast at every level. The result of this is that although I spent a while tweaking it and tried to get the best result I could, the game ended up quite a bit harder than I would have liked it to be. Now, I was able to beat it without it feeling too hard. It was a little challenging for me, but I was like, okay, this is challenging, but not impossible, not too difficult. This is probably the right level, but I should have made it a little bit easier from that point. But that's always hard to do. And I didn't have enough time to make any other changes and test the game by the time I got to that level. So any other changes that I made to the difficulty would have had to go in completely blind. And I thought that it was better to have a game that was pretty challenging than risk it and have a game that was way too easy. This was a mistake. Everyone that has played it has said it's way too hard for them, so maybe I'm secretly a god gamer at tower defense? But more realistically, I just understand the nuance of the game, know which upgrades aren't very good, spoiler, don't buy range for anything, save that money, and I know how to build a path that best optimizes the customer routes. Additionally, it isn't indicated anywhere that you get more money from a customer sleeping in the room than from leaving from the towers, which I thought I included in the tutorial, but I did not. So that's a way to increase your econ on the first day so that you can afford more towers going into the second day. Now, the second day is probably the hardest day, which is not good. That shouldn't be the hardest day. And on top of that, because of the way I nerfed the upgrades, all of the upgrades feel bad, but the muffin trays are essentially useless. The slow factor that you get from them is barely anything at all, and to compensate for that slow, they deal less damage than the coffee makers at the same upgrade levels, so you're pretty much entirely better off using coffee makers anywhere you would want to use a muffin tray. And the stereos are the most expensive, which meant I increased their power budget a little bit, but because the upgrades get so expensive so quickly, you get get to a point where the best possible thing to do is invest all your money in replacing your towers with the stereos and upgrading stereos as high as you can possibly get them, because that's the best way to maximize the way you spend your money. But that's all hindsight balance. None of that is reflected in the actual difficulty level. As it stands now, game's way too hard. But despite the game being too hard, and a lot of the problems I had both in my own mental blocks making the game, not scoping correctly, needing to pull in features that I didn't originally plan for, and not getting to the polish step, as well as needing to make my own mediocre music and sound effects, I think that the end result is still pretty fun, and I still love the concept, and at least I can cling to that. Even if the actual jam didn't go that great, I had a good concept. I can go to sleep good at night knowing my brain is good at stuff. If you've made it all the way this far in the video, then I appreciate you watching, and you probably enjoyed the content. So if you could hit it with a like, a comment, and a subscribe to my channel, I would very much appreciate that. I'm still a pretty small channel, so any growth at all feels really good for me. So I appreciate everyone who's been tuning in, everyone who's taken the time to like and comment. I really love all you guys. Thank you so much. I don't know how to end a video, and usually I have some little gaff or goof planned. I'm like, oh, when I don't know how to end the video this time, I'll do some nonsense, but I really didn't think about it this time. Do you guys want to meet my kitty cat, Majora? Say hi, Majora. Don't freak out. He's a scaredy cat. See, he's called Majora because he's got Majora's mask. Majora. Majora, look at the camera. He is not a fan. Majora, say bye. He's out of here.